We've come to Seattle, Washington, ModPo has, and we're really excited about all the poets that we're meeting here. And one of them is Timothy Yau, who is normally in Wisconsin, but is here in Seattle at the Modern Language Association Conference. And we took the opportunity to plan to meet him. And in a few minutes, we're going to go back to our hotel suite and talk with Tim Yau about John Yau, the poet John Yau. And Tim knows a lot about John Yau's poetry, and we've chosen a poem called A Sheaf of Pleasant Voices. We're going to be talking about that somewhat in the context of the New York School, so I'm really looking forward to that. I'm here with Timothy Yau. Tim, hi.
Hi.
I'm really excited to... Oh, my pleasure. We're going to be talking about a poem by John Yau, and it's from this John Yau book, which is published by Penguin, called Paradiso Diaspora. And the illustration on the front is just surrealist enough to give you... Yau, of course, knows painting and visual art really well, but it's just dreamlike surrealist enough to suggest a little bit about the poem we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Which is called A Sheaf of Pleasant Voices. Tim, why don't you read it, and then we'll just talk about it.
Great. I'd love to. A Sheaf of Pleasant Voices. There are rooftops made of cloud remnants, gathered by a trader, dabbling in car parts and burlap. At night, I dive onto the breeze, fermenting above the dirt, and dream that I am a crocodile, a tin of shoe polish, an audience of two. In the morning, before the smallest yawn becomes a noodle, I am offered a ribbon of yellow smoke. I opt for fuzzy rocks and clawed water. And of course, the perishable window. I am one of the last computer chain errors to be illuminated. I tell you, there are rooftops on which the moon stops being a cold jewel. And one by one, the mountains begin their descent from the chambers of a lost book.
Tim, this is the writing here is a combination of absolutely lucid, flowy, and in some moments stellar lyricism. And what the hell?
Exactly.
I don't know if surrealism is the right word, but that's the one I'm going to start with. A non sequitur series of mixed metaphor situations and images.
Yeah.
So does that sound right? And is that fairly typical of John Yau, or at least in this book? I mean, is this a style you recognize?
Yeah, I think this is a beautifully kind of representative John Yau poem in a lot of ways. I think you really hit it on the head, that he has this ability to write these poems that on the surface seem like they have this almost kind of seamless lyric quality to them. They, there's a, there's a beautiful sound and rhythm to them. There's a wonderful flow. And then when you look more carefully, you're like, wait, what? Like, what is happening between line 2 and line 3? How did we get from line 3 to line 4?
Right.
So that combination of this kind of beautiful, limpid surface and then a kind of, in terms of what's actually being said, this kind of jaggedness or these kinds of like shocking moves, that strikes me as very characteristic of his style.
And so there is, and tell me if this is wrong, but there is a commitment implicitly in experimental writing or the avant-garde in this idea that a poet who's capable of writing phrase by phrase with, I don't know if traditional is the right word, but classic, perfect lyricism would be committed to writing poems thought of as difficult, right? Mm-hmm. So not saying, I'm going to use my line-by-line writing sheer talent to write stuff you understand.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a kind of bravery in. Okay. So why don't we each pick a phrase that is like what the hell, head scratching, we don't have, maybe define each one, but let's just put a few into the record. I'll start. Fuzzy rocks is one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What do you have?
The crocodile, tin of shoe polish, and audience of two. I mean, that strikes me as like a classic kind of surrealist sort of conjunction of like the crocodile and the tin of shoe polish, right? Something that's from the animal kingdom, something that's, you know, a kind of human artifact. It's like, what do these things have to do with each other?
Yes, that's a good one. The yawn that becomes a noodle.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. But, yeah, and that's a great example of how the other element that I think is present in there's this kind of like comedy or goofiness in Yau's work that crops up also unexpectedly, and it kind of diffuses or deflects the lyricism in a lot of ways. Like Yau isn't afraid to be silly.
Right.
And, you know, at a moment where it's like, you know, the smallest yawn becomes a noodle, right? And it kind of veers off into this almost kind of slapstick moment. So I love those kinds of transitions as well.
Do you have another one?
You know, I think that I feel like the breeze fermenting, right? It's kind of like
Where does the breeze ferment?
I dive onto the breeze fermenting above the dirt. I mean, there's a number of things going on in that one, like diving onto something that you can't actually dive onto, right? Breeze fermenting, right? You can kind of, gloss that as like, okay, something smells bad or something like that. But then it's above the dirt. It's both kind of simple and yet, like, what does that mean? It's really hard to parse.
Tim, there is a bit of story chronology.
Yes.
At night, then there's a dream, and then there's the morning, right?
Yeah.
So, dream work. Dream work, Freud used I don't know what the German was, but in the interpretation of dreams, 1899 or whatever, he's coined the term dream work as a kind of network of interpretation of wacky, surrealist stuff that happens when you dream.
Yeah, yeah.
So dream work seems like the right approach to interpretation here. Do we want to try to interpret the dream? I mean I'm not sure it's a good idea, but maybe it is.
We could give it a shot. I mean, I just want to say, though, that I think you've also put your finger on another thing that's very characteristic of him, which is that Yau likes stories. He does like narrative in a way. But again, just as with the kind of surface of lyric that's very coherent, we have kind of the structure of a narrative, but then the pieces kind of don't fit together. And I think you're right that thinking about that is how dreams are organized, right? They have kind of the structure of an experience, but the content seems kind of scrambled or irrational.
And as far as story, this is a classic strategy that I'm guessing John Yau learned from the New York School poets of starting something, digressing because of the sheer beauty of the thoughts and the weirdness of the thoughts, and then coming back to it saying, oh yeah, by the way, this is where I was before. We have it here. There are rooftops. And then almost at the end, I tell you there are rooftops.
Yes, exactly.
In other words, I didn't forget that there are rooftops.
Yeah.
And also, I'll throw out something else that sounds like the ending is gorgeous. And it is so John Ashberyan or Barbara Guestian. It just feels, and one by one the mountains begin their descent from the chambers of a lost book. Yeah. And it really feels like the end of a great John Ashbery poem. Yes. Okay, it's present tense. Does that signify anything? Why present tense?
There are rooftops. Yeah, I mean, I do think that the presentness, again, it adds to the dreamlike quality. A dream is always something that kind of seems to be happening to you sort of in the moment. What else does the present tense do?
Well, at night I dive onto the breeze. Yeah. In other words, that could either be, this is what I did, but because it's a dream, or maybe in a dream, it's a present tense. That's what we do in dreams. Yes. Also, it could be, and I don't think that's what it is, but present tense for a story could signify, this is what I typically do. At night,
this could be a kind of repetitive action or something that's happened before. That's what I usually do at night. Usually I dive onto the breeze.
What is the poetic aesthetic effect of writing in the present tense, especially in a poem where the story is not clear and the images are surrealistic? What's the effect of doing that instead of past tense?
That's a great question.
I know.
I think that.
No, I mean, I didn't. I'm so glad I'm asking you.
Yeah, it's a hard question. It's a hard question.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that maybe one thing it highlights, again, I think it points back to the fact that Yau is fundamentally a lyric poet, right? And that the idea of a kind of lyric presentness, that it's sort of, eternally present as opposed to, right, the idea of the classic kind of Wordsworthian sort of, like reflection and, in tranquility, and that you're kind of looking back on an experience. But at the same time, what lyric does, it kind of makes that experience present again. And so I think the reason to use the present tense in a poem like this is to draw the reader into that lyric moment, right? It's not a story that you can kind of objectify, put in the past, attach to another character. And one other thing maybe we can talk about in this context is the lyric I, the speaker. Because I think, Yao does such interesting things with that speaker because he is very interested in the I. Unlike some poets who have been kind of very critical or resistant to the lyric I, Yao has always kind of loved the lyric I in a way, but he also does such strange things with it. So,
Can you give me an example of a strange thing he does with the I in this poem?
I am offered a ribbon of yellow smoke. I opt for fuzzy rocks and clawed water.
Let's stop there. I opt for... What kind of word is opt?
I opt,
there?
yes.
As if in a dream you had choice or will or intention?
Yeah. And again, it is a really funny word choice there, right? It's not I choose, I grasp, opt.
Imagine opting for a fuzzy rock.
Right.
What the hell?
Yeah. I mean, opt, and again, it feels like the diction is so interesting because, when do we opt? It's like, we have like two choices on like a menu and I opt for one or the other.
Right.
It's a very kind of quotidian, sort of everyday way of choice. It actually kind of deflates the significance in some ways. I opt, but then the choice that I make, fuzzy rocks, is what is that choice? So, I think what it does is that we don't really know very much about the lyric speaker, right? I mean, the first time we're introduced to that speaker is at night I dive into the breeze. So all the actions that are associated with this speaker are very cryptic. The choices that the speaker is making that seem kind of defining are, sometimes kind of incomprehensible. And yet we get the sense that they're significant in some way, right? The tone of the poem seems to insist on that, the choice of fuzzy rocks is important, and yet it's also absurd. So I think that we kind of have to kind of do a kind of almost backwards act of construction as to who this lyric speaker is from these parts that really don't quite seem to go together.
Can we, this transitions from your talk about the I, can we do a close reading of the little computer section? And of course the perishable window, and maybe that window is a computer window, in Windows, but maybe not. The perishable window, I am one of the last computer chain errors to be illuminated. I wish I had talked to the tech guys who are filming us right now before we started this thing. But a chain error, what is a chain error?
I mean, it does feel like an allusion to coding, right? I mean, it does feel like an allusion to like some kind of breakdown in programming or something like that. But it doesn't. It almost feels like it's meant to sound like a technical term, but it really isn't, right? It's more like a breakdown in... I mean, I kind of read it as a breakdown in logic, right? As a breakdown in kind of the progression from one thing to another, like the chain of meaning is being kind of broken. So, and then, when there's a breakdown in logic, the computer has an error, right? The computer, you get an error message or something like that. So I am one of the last computer chain errors. So I'm some kind of mistake. I'm some kind of breakdown. In logic, and a logic that's attached to a machine, not to a person. But then, in classic Yao style, he then completes that thought with the phrase "to be illuminated," which is not something that we associated with the computer at all, right? I mean, sure, I guess the screen could light up, but the illumination feels more like a kind of enlightenment or understanding, or even like just shining a light on something. But shining a light on a line of computer code doesn't tell you anything. So. And then, of course, all of that being wrapped up to, this is a statement, a first-person statement. This is me. I am that error that is illuminated.
Yeah. I mean, when we get to that point, there was a kind of poetry, fortunately not much written now or doesn't see the light of day, where this kind of statement would be taken very seriously. I'm not going to name a poet that I don't, from, let's say a late 50s, early 60s confessional poet who would at a crucial moment would say, I am, a mussel cast adrift across the ocean. Right. And that kind of, pardon me, silly, overstated, and unironic thing about how lost I am. And this seems to be a wink, smart, rather brilliant and beautifully written gesture away from that kind of grand statement.
I think that's a good way.
I am one of the last computer chain errors, and it sort of casts a shadow on the entire poem because this kind of surrealist non sequitur style is so chain error-y, and so are dreams. Let's talk about the title, A Sheaf of Pleasant Voices. All right, you do Sheaf. Please, tell us about Sheaf.
Sheaf.
It's a funny thing for a poem of couplets.
Right. So, I mean, sheaf, we can think of like, a sheaf of wheat, a kind of, bundle of plants.
Okay.
The more common thing that we might think of is, a sheaf of paper, a group of pages.
Right.
And so there's already a kind of duality in that word. But a sheaf of voices is strange because voices are an intangible thing. You cannot grasp them. So what would it mean to organize voices in a sheaf? It almost seems like there almost feels like something sinister to that in a way, as if you could kind of gather up people's voices and kind of combine them into some kind of bundle or package. But then that's kind of deflated by the fact that it's pleasant, right? They're not terrifying, they're not ominous, they're not beautiful, they're pleasant, they're nice. And so I think that what seems to be going on there is we have a sort of conjunction of things where there's a kind of gesture towards something that could be very grandiose, very ominous, and then there's a kind of deflation of it through it's simply pleasant, right? This is a nice thing.
You said a few minutes ago that the I in Yau, he likes the I, and the I is, I don't want to say stable, but it is an I. It is a fairly consistent I. It's not a collage I of all kinds of different voices, and yet the title is a sheaf of different voices.
Yes, that's a good point. I mean, and when you said it that way, I thought of like Eliot's, like he do the police in different voices, right?
And that's not what this is.
That's not what this is, exactly. It's and the voices are, for Eliot, the point is the fragmentation of those voices, right? There's so many different voices, and I can't kind of corral them all. And here, right, they're kind of brought together in this way that is ultimately pleasurable, right? And I do think that seems like a very nice way of thinking about what Yau does with the I, that he kind of brings these really disparate materials together into this I that still is, enjoyable to listen to. The voice is pleasant, even if what it's saying is very strange.
Fantastic. Okay, why don't we each offer some final thoughts about any aspect of the poem, maybe twice. Right, so you'll go first, then I'll go, then you'll go, then I'll go. Just some other thoughts, maybe not in any order, that you wanted to add to the record of this conversation.
Well, I think another thing that I think about is the way the way Yau uses lines and phrases and enjambments, right? So there are rooftops made of cloud remnants. So, for example, each of those lines kind of holds together and seems very coherent and straightforward. There are rooftops. Fine. Made of cloud remnants. Fine. It's the juxtaposition, it's the transition between those two lines that creates the disorientation. And then the phrases that are supposed to add more information or clarify simply serve to obscure more often. Gathered by a traitor. Wait, who is that? Like, who is that person? And then dabbling in, okay, we're learning more about the traitor, but car parts and burlap, like what kind of person trades in that? So again, the sort of...
And what kind of roof is it?
Exactly, right. We've gone very distant from the... Yeah, exactly. But as you say, there's that gesture towards coherence, like I didn't forget about the rooftops, I am still talking about the rooftops. So I think that, that gesture of I am kind of adding to and... I'm giving you information, but the more information I give you at some level, the more obscure what I'm talking about becomes.
Thank you. All right, my first of two final thoughts is, to bring Ashbery back in again, there's a poem by Ashbery called Hard Times. It's a dystopian, or a fun dystopian, fake dystopian poem about how things are really screwed up and how the world is run on a shoestring, is what he says.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Yao has really mastered that image. This almost feels like there could be a painting
Yes.
that goes along with it.
Yes, absolutely.
Of this crazy rooftop made of car parts and burlap with a trader who built. The roofer is a crazy trader.
Yeah.
He's sort of standing on the side, and then the speaker dives into this situation and then has a dream with a crocodile and a shoe polish and a noodle for a yawn. And, like, things are really fucked up.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then what's also similar, again, to Ashbery is the absolutely lovely, natural lyric ending of this. Not that we're out of the dystopian situation, but that there is always going to be a moonrise, and there is always going to be something, some solace. There's beauty to be found in this mess, right?
Yeah.
And the lost book, I don't know where it comes from, but
Yeah.
instead of the moon rising, the mountains begin to descend.
Yes.
So it's like a weird weird landscape at the beginning of another evening, where maybe we'll have another dystopian dream.
Yeah.
But this is all coming out of the chambers or chapters or sections of a book, but the book is lost. You don't know where you are, but there's something lyrically lovely about this craziness. This doesn't mean he's willing tonally to adapt and adjust to things being fucked up, but rather he's going to chronicle it as a lyric poet should, rather than trying to make sense of it. He's going to allow the nonsense to kind of live in the poem.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great way of thinking about
Thank
it.
you. You have another final thought?
Yeah, listening to you talk about the ending, I find myself reflecting on the fact that, I've been reading Yao's work for many, many years, and I often have trouble understanding the kind of pleasure that I take from reading Yao's work, or the beauty that I find in it, because those moments are so gorgeous, and then when I begin to examine them more clearly, I always find that the strangeness behind them. And yet Yao is very enamored of those gorgeous, beautiful effects, right? He always wants to hang on to that lyricism, even as he throws us curveballs and as he sort of undermines it or deflates it in various ways. The pleasure of poetry is always, I think, uppermost for him, and I think that's another connection to Ashbery. That sense that lyricism still has that function, even if it's in a strange world that we really can't make any sense of.
That was really great. I think we've done a pretty good job of those final thoughts. So I want to defer my final thought for another conversation and simply thank you for being willing to sit down and talk about this John Yau poem. Not
Absolutely.
The easiest thing to do.
And it's challenging, but a lot of fun to read.
So the book is Paradiso Diaspora, and the author, of course, is John Yau, and I've been with Timothy Yu. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.